blowing out the candles on another birthday cake. Old enough to look back and laugh at my mistakes, young enough to look ahead and like what I see. My best days are ahead of me. Hello, it's John Ricks, the 76-year-old kite surfer, back to talk more about how to stay healthy and fit as we grow older. If you've been watching these videos, and I hope you have, this is number 5 in the series, you'll know that we've been talking about 4 general areas. They're endurance and stamina, strength and muscle tone, balance and flexibility, and diet and nutrition. Today we're going to talk about how to maintain a balanced diet so that we can be as healthy as possible, look and feel as good as we possibly can. We're going to place an emphasis on having a balanced diet. We're not going to go to extremes. A few years ago, some of my friends went on an all-protein diet, and they all lost weight. They all looked like they were dying, and indeed they probably were. Their body was just withering away. And of course, as soon as they stopped the diet, the weight came right back on, and they looked just as big and just as overweight as they did before. So today we're going to talk about just common sense changes that help us to maintain a balanced diet. The sad fact is about 1/3 to 1/2 of Americans are overweight. But what does that really mean? Does how much you weigh really matter? Well, I suppose it does to an extent, but that's not really the whole story. I'm about the same height as Tyreek Hill, formerly a wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, now, regrettably, with the Miami Dolphins. He weighs about 50 pounds more than me, but nobody's going to call him fat. The truth is, we're all genetically different, aren't we? Some of us are tall and slim, some of us are short and wide, some are big and tall, some are small and petite. Those genetic differences were determined about 9 months before we were born, and really there isn't much we can do about those things. It's not so much how much you weigh or how big you are that we're talking about here. What we're talking about is how much excess fat are you carrying around. So how do you know if you're too fat? Oh, I know it's politically incorrect to talk about being fat, but let's be honest with ourselves here. How do we know if we're too fat? Well, one easy way is the eye test. If you look in the mirror and you think you're too fat, there's a good chance you are, but not necessarily. If you're blessed with a short, wide skeleton, you might not be. If, however, you've got folds and creases where you really shouldn't have folds and creases, well, you're probably too fat. The jiggle test. If your fanny or your thighs jiggle or your belly jiggles, or if you're a man, if your chest jiggles when you walk, chances are you're carrying around too much fat. Another easy way is just to make a simple measurement. If your waist is bigger around than your chest, there's a really good chance that you're too fat. Well, one reason to lose that excess fat is to look better and to feel better, to have more vigor, to have more energy. But there's a more compelling reason than that. The American Medical Association has determined that there are a multitude of diseases and physical conditions that are caused by being too fat or are made worse by being too fat. Some of those conditions are diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, which can lead to heart disease and heart attack, bone and joint problems, including osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, gallstones, liver disease, several kinds of cancer, stroke, even mental conditions like depression and anxiety, and general body pain. The list goes on and contains nearly 100 different diseases and conditions. So how do we shed that excess fat? Well, as I explained in a previous video, we lose weight by burning more calories than we eat. Generally speaking, in order to lose weight, we'll have to limit ourselves to around 1,500 to 1,700 calories per day. And of course, we'll have to get some exercise and some physical activity as well. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? But saying it's simple, unfortunately, isn't the same thing as saying that it's easy. It's going to require effort and planning and persistence. Your body's going to fight you on this. It's going to try to hold on to that excess fat, that emergency survival storage. I often hear people say that they go on a strict diet and it's relatively easy to lose 5 or 10 pounds or maybe even 15 or 20 pounds, but then they hit a plateau and they can't lose any more. Part of that is because your body is such an amazing machine. It adapts to the new level of intake. It does this by slowing down your metabolism, the number of calories that you burn just to breathe and stay alive. It simply learns to get by on less. In addition, you're carrying around less weight. So in the normal course of your activities during the day, you burn fewer calories. And we can offset this to a large degree by adding more muscle mass. It requires more calories for the body to maintain your muscle than it does to maintain fat. So as we add muscle mass, we increase our rate of metabolism. We actually then burn more calories just sitting around and watching TV. Proper nutrition is going to lead to an increase in muscle mass and decrease the amount of fat we're carrying around. With all that in mind, let's talk about what we eat. We get calories from three main sources. They're protein, carbohydrates, and fat. All right, let's talk first about protein. Generally speaking, your body needs about 0.3 to 0.5 grams of protein for every pound you weigh. In other words, to compute how many grams of protein you need 1/3 to 1/2 of your body weight in pounds. If you weigh 150 pounds, that means 50 to 75 grams of protein. If you weigh 200 pounds, that means 65 to 100 grams of protein. So why does your body need this protein? Well, it uses it to build muscle and bone. It uses it to make hormones and enzymes. And it's also a secondary source of energy. Meat, poultry, fish, and dairy products are all great sources of protein. And we also get protein from beans and grains and nuts. We'll talk in a little while about how to get the proper amount of protein without having to do a whole lot of counting of grams and calories and so forth. After all, we want to make this as simple as possible. Now let's talk about carbohydrates. Contrary to what you might have heard, we need carbohydrates in our diet. Our body needs them to live. About 45 to 65% of the calories we eat each day should come from carbohydrates, about half. That means about 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrates per day. Carbohydrates are a little bit more complicated to talk about. There are two broad categories of carbohydrates. They are simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. But keep in mind, this isn't really a binary situation. This is a spectrum from very, very simple, such as refined sugar, to the very most complex. Simple carbohydrates are called that because of their molecular makeup. They're made up of short sugar molecules that are easy to digest and enter the bloodstream fairly rapidly. I've listed fruits and dairy products here in green because although they are classified as simple carbohydrates, their molecules are relatively long, and they also contain a good number of vitamins and minerals and other nutrients that our body needs. Syrup, refined sugar, candy, soft drinks, other snacks, white bread, white rice, anything made out of bleached refined flour is simple carbohydrates and is much more likely to spike the blood sugar and be turned into fat. In a nutshell, you should avoid the things that are listed in orange here and enjoy the things that are listed in green. Now, you're not going to eliminate all candy and soft drinks, I know that, but limit them and emphasize more fruits and dairy products. On the other hand, complex carbohydrates are made up of multiple sugar molecules all joined together in a string. So they're much more difficult to digest, they take longer to digest, they pass into the bloodstream more slowly, and are less likely to be turned into fat, and more likely to be used as energy. Complex carbohydrates are things like vegetables, whole grains, and bread and cereal made from whole grains, beans and other legumes, and potatoes. I've listed potatoes in orange here because potatoes and other starchy vegetables are relatively simple on this scale of simplicity to complexity. They enter your bloodstream very quickly and are thus more likely to spike your blood sugar and be transformed into fat. Yes, our bodies really do need carbohydrates. When people talk about eliminating carbohydrates from their diet, what they should really be talking about is eliminating those simple carbohydrates, those things that are made from white sugar and bleached flour, the things that are likely to spike your blood sugar and be stored as fat. Instead, we should be emphasizing the complex carbohydrates, things such as vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and legumes. These things are not only harder to digest and therefore enter the bloodstream more slowly, but they contain many, many more nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that our body needs. Now, let's talk a little bit about fat. Surprisingly enough, and contrary to what many people would tell you, our bodies also need a certain amount of fat. It's recommended that between 20 and 35% of our daily calories come from fat.
That's about 35 to 60 grams.
Why does the body need fat? Well, it surrounds and cushions our internal organs, helps to protect them from damage. It helps to keep us warm. It lubricates our joints. It's a building block for our cells. We even need a certain amount of cholesterol. Every cell membrane is made primarily from cholesterol. Can we have too much fat? Well, of course we can. Can we have too much cholesterol? Of course we can. But we don't want to eliminate fat and cholesterol entirely, and in fact, we probably can't. What we're after here is a sensible balance between protein, fat, and carbohydrates. How do we define a balanced diet? Well, a balanced diet means about 20 to 35% of your calories should come from protein. That amounts to 50 to 85 grams per day, depending on your body weight. About 45 to 65% of your calories should come from carbohydrates. And again, we should emphasize the complex carbohydrates, not the simple sugars. That's about 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrates.
About 20 to 35% of our calories should come from fat. That's about 35 to 60 grams.
How do we achieve that balanced diet? Well, we could count grams and calories, but not for very long. Most of us will get really tired of that routine in a really short time. Later on, I'll have some more specific things to say about this, and I'll also have some tips on how to eat sensibly at restaurants and fast food joints. But for now, let's keep it really simple. Let's just make sure that every meal has some protein and some fruit and vegetables. Each day, if you have 4 to 6 ounces of meat, that's about 30 to 50 grams of protein. Do you have to weigh the meat? No, not really. If you have a piece of meat, fish, or poultry that's about the size of 1 or 2 slices of bread, you're in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 ounces of meat. That's close enough. Each day you should have 2 or 3 cups of fruits or vegetables. That will provide nearly enough calories from carbs. Add a little bread and some dairy, and you're there, or close enough. Go easy on the sugary sweets. This mix of protein and carbohydrates should give you about the right amount of fat. So for now, we won't even worry about that. If you do all these things, you'll be well on your way to having a balanced diet. Well, as I said, we'll talk more about diet later. Until then, keep walking a mile, or maybe even increase it to 1.25 miles or 1.5 miles, or lengthen your stride or pick up your pace a little bit. Keep doing some yoga every day. And try to achieve a balanced diet by having a little bit of protein, a little bit of carbs, and a little bit of fat with every meal. Eliminate those sugary snacks, and we're well on our way to increasing our level of health and fitness. Until next time, goodbye and good health.